The blue lights on the council chamber walls flickered like dying stars. Speaker Veltar stood at the center of the great hall, his thin body shaking with fear and exhaustion. Round him, the other council members sat in their floating chairs, their pale faces showing the same hopeless expression that had haunted them for months. "We have tried everything," Veltar said, his voice barely above a whisper. The translation device around his neck turned his words into sounds that other species could understand. 17 different civilizations have received our calls for help. 17 different ways of saying no. Council member Zixara floated closer to the speaker's platform. Her large eyes were wet with tears that looked like liquid silver. What did the Altarians say this time? The same thing they always say. Too far away? It's not their problem. They suggested we try to negotiate with the Korthoks ourselves. Veltar's skin changed from pale blue to dark purple, showing his anger. How do you negotiate with monsters who steal children? The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of the life support systems. Outside the great windows, they could see their beautiful capital city stretching toward the horizon. Tall crystal towers reached up toward the three moons that hung in the purple sky. Gardens filled with glowing flowers covered every available space between the buildings. It was a peaceful world, built by a peaceful people who had never known real war. That was exactly why they were helpless now. Elder Nextum, the oldest member of the council, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. "Tell us again. About the mining colonies? How many are left?" Veltar closed his eyes for a moment before answering. The numbers were burned into his memory. Kepler 7 fell last week. That leaves only Kepler 4 and Kepler 9 still sending signals. But their transmissions are getting weaker every day. The Korthoks are working our people to death in those mines. How many prisoners? Asked another council member. We estimate 40,000 Zephyrians are being held across all the occupied colonies. Men, women, children. The Korthoks don't care about age when they need workers. Veltar's voice broke slightly. My own nephew was visiting Kepler 7 when they attacked. He was only 12 years old. The council members looked at each other with expressions of shared pain. Every family had lost someone to the Korthok raids. The attacks had started 8 months ago, beginning with the outer mining colonies, where security was lightest. The Korthoks would arrive in massive ships, overwhelm the small defense stations, and take everyone they could capture. They needed workers for their illegal mining operations in the dead systems. Beyond civilized space, the Zephyrians had never faced anything like this before. Their species had evolved on low-gravity worlds where violence was almost unknown. They were tall and thin, with delicate bones that would break easily under stress. Their technology was advanced, but it was all designed for peaceful purposes. Mining equipment, farming tools, research instruments. They had no weapons, no military. Ships, no soldiers. What about the Centauri Federation? Asked Zixara. They have the largest fleet in this sector. They said helping us would violate their non-interference policies, Veltar replied bitterly. Apparently stopping slavery counts as interference in local conflicts. The Kepler Union? Resource constraints? They said they need all their ships to protect their own trade routes. Elder Nextum made a sound like a sigh. In the old days, civilized species helped each other. The vegan plague threatened everyone. We all worked together to find a cure. When the Rigel system's star began to die, every nearby civilization sent ships to help evacuate the population. Those were natural disasters, said another council member. This is different. This is deliberate evil, and apparently no one wants to get involved when the evil has teeth. Veltar looked down at the datapad in his hands. The list of species they had contacted was long, but they were running out of options. Most of the major civilizations had already said no. The minor ones either didn't have the military power to help, or were too afraid of the Korthoks to try. There is one more possibility, he said slowly, but I'm not sure we should consider it. Tell us, said Elder Nextam. The humans. They established first contact protocols 3 months ago. Their embassy is small, just a few representatives, but they seemed interested in joining the galactic community. The council chamber erupted in worried chatter. Everyone had heard the reports about humanity. It came from a world so dangerous that the Galactic Survey had classified it as uninhabitable. Storms that could level mountains, temperature swings that would kill most species, earthquakes that split continents, and animals so deadly that they made Korthok. Warriors looked gentle. Any species that evolved on such a world would have to be incredibly violent just to survive. "They're from a Class 12 death world," said Zixara. "The reports say their entire planet is trying to kill them every day. What kind of beings would that create?" "It's exactly the kind we've been told to avoid," replied another council member. "The Altarians warned us about them, said they were too aggressive for civilized contact." Veltar nodded. "I've read the reports too. Their world has creatures that hunt in packs, plants that can kill with a touch, whether that changes without warning. They have wars between their own people, actually fight each other for resources and territory. But," Elder next to him said, "quietly they might be willing to fight the Korthoks too." The chamber fell silent again. It was a terrible choice. Ask for help from violent beings who might be almost as dangerous as the Korthoks themselves, or watch their people die slowly in the mines of dead worlds. "We could try to explain the situation to them," suggested Zixara. "Make it clear that we need peacekeepers, not conquerors. Perhaps their violent nature could be controlled if we make the right kind of request." Veltar looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow council members. They were all thinking the same thing: their peaceful ways, their trust in diplomacy and negotiation. Their belief that all problems could be solved through talking. None of it had saved their people from the Korthoks. "I'll draft a message," he said finally. "We'll explain our situation clearly. We'll ask for humanitarian assistance, for peacekeeping forces, for help in negotiating the release of our people. We'll make it very clear that we don't want conquest or revenge. We just want our families back." Sveltar began to compose the message to humanity. None of the council members realized they were about to learn an important lesson about Deathworld species. When you ask them for help, you don't get to choose what kind of help they give you. The message was sent within an hour, transmitted across space toward the small blue and green world that had spawned humanity. It was a simple plea written in the formal diplomatic language that all civilized species use for official communications: "To the government of Earth, from the Zephyrian Council, we humbly request assistance in a humanitarian crisis. Our people are being held against their will by hostile forces. We seek peaceful resolution and the safe return of our citizens. Any aid you can provide would be deeply appreciated." What they were about to discover was that humans had a very different definition of peaceful resolution than the rest of the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command, chair aboard the Earth Defense Force station orbiting Luna. The message from the Zephyrians had arrived 2 days ago, and he had read it at least 20 times since then. Each time the words made him angrier. 40,000 people enslaved, children taken from their families, entire colonies wiped out by raiders who treated intelligent beings like cattle. Morrison had seen a lot of terrible things during his 15 years in the military, but this hit him in a way that made his hands shake with rage. "Sir Admiral Hayes is on the come," reported Lieutenant Tony Garcia from the communications station. Morrison straightened his uniform and activated the secure channel. Admiral Lisa Hayes appeared on the main screen, her steel-gray eyes showing the same controlled fury that Morrison felt in his chest. "Captain, I assume you've read the Zephyrian request," Hayes said without greeting. "Yes, ma'am. 40,000 civilians being worked to death in illegal mines. The local governments are too scared or too selfish to help. It's about the size of it. The politicians back home are having heated discussions about whether we should get involved. Something about not wanting to appear too aggressive to our new galactic neighbors." Morrison leaned forward. "With respect, since when do we need permission to stop slavers?" Hayes smiled grimly. "That's exactly what I told the president this morning. We're not asking for permission anymore. 3 ships are being prepared for immediate departure: UES Liberty, UES Defiance, and UES Retribution. Who's leading the ground forces?" "Colonel Ryan Parker and the 1st Marine Expeditionary Unit. 2,400 Marines who volunteered the moment they heard about the situation. Apparently word spread through the barracks pretty quickly." Morrison nodded. He wasn't surprised. Human military personnel had a special hatred for anyone who hurt civilians, especially children.
Ow.
The Marine Corps had a saying that they lived by: every child deserves to grow up safe. It didn't matter if those children were human or alien. Our timeline? Morrison asked. We launch in 6 hours. The journey to the Zephyr system will take 2 weeks at maximum burn. Colonel Parker's already loading his people and equipment. After the call ended, Morrison walked to the observation deck to watch the preparations. 3 massive ships hung in space near the station, their hulls dark gray and bristling with weapons. They weren't the largest ships in the Earth fleet, but they were built for exactly this kind of mission: fast, heavily armed, and carrying enough Marines to take and hold multiple objectives. 2 weeks later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system. The blue and purple world of Zephyr Prime hung in space ahead of them, beautiful and peaceful. Too peaceful, Morrison thought. These people had never learned to protect themselves, and now they were paying the price. Incoming transmission from Zephyr Prime, Garcia reported. The main screen showed a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and large eyes. Morrison recognized him from the briefing files as Speaker Veltar, the leader of the Zephyrian Council. Captain Morrison, welcome to our system. We're deeply grateful that Earth has chosen to help us in our time of need. Speaker Veltar, we're here to get your people back. Where are the Korthoks holding them? Our scouts have located 3 main facilities. They are built inside large asteroids in the dead system beyond our outer planets. We estimate the Korthoks have 50,000. Warriors guarding approximately 12,000 prisoners. Morrison felt his jaw tighten. The numbers were worse than the original reports. We'll need detailed scans of those facilities and current intelligence on Korthok positions. Of course. But Captain, we must discuss the approach carefully. Traditionally, these conflicts are resolved through careful negotiation. Perhaps we could offer the Korthoks relocation to uninhabited systems in exchange for releasing our people. Morrison stared at the alien leader for a moment. Speaker, let me make sure. I understand. These Korthoks attacked your colonies, killed your people, and enslaved your children. And you want to negotiate with them? That is how civilized species handle conflicts. We must follow proper diplomatic procedures. Mediation, discussion of terms, gradual de-escalation. These things take time, but they prevent unnecessary violence. How much time have your people been in those mines? 8 months, Veltar replied quietly. And how many have died while you've been trying diplomacy? Veltar's skin color shifted to a darker blue. We estimate 3,000 casualties from overwork, poor conditions, and punishment beatings. Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. Every face showed the same expression of disbelief and anger. 3,000 people dead, while politicians talked about proper procedures. Veltar, I need you to understand something. Where I come from, when someone kicks down your door and takes your family, you don't negotiate. Make sure they never do it again. Veltar seemed confused. But surely there must be some way to resolve this peacefully. Violence should always be the last option. It was the last option, Morrison replied firmly. The Korthoks made that choice 8 months ago when they started taking slaves. Every day since then has been borrowed time. An hour later, Morrison met with Colonel Parker via video link. The Marine commander was a big man with scarred hands and eyes that had seen too much combat. He was exactly the kind of officer you wanted when the mission was to rescue hostages from heavily defended positions. Colonel, what's your assessment? Morrison asked. The Korthoks have made one big mistake, sir. They built their facilities, assuming they would have time to relocate prisoners if threatened. Their defensive positions are designed to fight off other pirates, not a coordinated military assault. How long do you need? Give me 18 hours from the time we begin the attack. We'll hit all 3 facilities simultaneously. No warnings. No demands for surrender? No time for them to hurt the prisoners? Morrison nodded. It was exactly what he wanted to hear. The Zephyrians are expecting us to try diplomacy first. Parker's expression darkened. Sir, I've got Marines down here who've been looking at photos of Zephyrian children in chains. I've got sergeants who are writing letters to their own kids back home, trying to explain why some monsters deserve to die. We didn't come here to talk. Colonel, you have full authorization for immediate assault. Bring those people home. As Morrison ended the call, he reflected on the cultural gap between humans and their new galactic neighbors. The other species seemed to think that talking could solve any problem, that violence was always wrong, that civilized beings should never use force. They had never learned the hard lesson that humans knew by heart. Sometimes evil people only understand one language, and the only way to protect the innocent is to speak that language better than the monsters do. The Zephyrians were about to learn what happened when you asked Deathworlders for help. Wouldn't get the careful diplomatic solution they expected. They would get something far more effective, and far more final. The Korthoks had built their slave operation assuming they would face the same weak responses they had always encountered from civilized species that had no idea that humans had. A very different definition of civilization, one that included the absolute right of good people to destroy evil ones. In 18 hours, they would find out exactly what that meant. The attack began at exactly 0600 ship time. Colonel Parker stood in the briefing room of the UES Liberty, watching his Marines make final preparations for what they all knew would be a brutal fight. Around him, 2,400 of Earth's finest warriors checked their weapons, sealed their armor, and said quiet prayers for the people they were about to save. "Listen up," Parker called out over the comm system. "In 30 minutes, we're going to hit 3 enemy positions simultaneously. Each facility holds about 4,000 prisoners. Men, women, children who have been slaves for 8 months. Every minute we waste is another minute those people suffer." Sergeant Danny Rodriguez adjusted the straps on his assault pack and looked around at his squad. These were men he had served with for 3 years through missions on hostile worlds and rescue operations in places most people couldn't pronounce. They had never failed to bring people home alive. "Remember what we're here for," Rodriguez told his men. "Every civilian we save is someone's kid going home to their family. Every slaver we stop is one less monster in the galaxy." Move toward the breaching pods with the quiet efficiency that came from years of training. These weren't the careful, gradual assault ships that other species used for warfare. They were essentially controlled crashes designed to put human soldiers directly inside enemy installations before the defenders knew what was happening. Major Kate Thompson coordinated the assault from the command center, watching 3 different tactical displays at once. Each screen showed one of the Korthok facilities, massive asteroids that had been hollowed out and turned into mining operations. Intelligence reports indicated heavy defenses and at least 50,000 enemy warriors. "Alpha Team, you have the primary facility," Thompson said into her headset. "Bravo Team takes the secondary site. Charlie Team gets the command center. Remember, the prisoners are our priority. Get them out first, then worry about the enemy." The Korthoks had prepared for the kind of warfare they knew from dealing with other galactic species. Long-range weapon exchanges that lasted for days, formal challenges and counter-challenges. Gradual escalation, with plenty of time to negotiate or withdraw. They had defensive positions designed to fight off pirate raids and the occasional patrol ship. They had never faced humans in combat. The first breaching pod hit the main facility like a meteorite, cutting through the outer hull and burying itself deep in the asteroid's core. Before the Korthok defenders could react, 30 Marines were already inside their base, moving through corridors with deadly precision. Rodriguez and his squad emerged from their pod into a scene that made his blood boil. The corridor was lined with cells, each one packed with Zephyrian prisoners. Men and women pressed against the energy barriers, their thin faces showing hope for the first time in months. Children reached through the gaps, crying for help in languages the Marines didn't understand but recognized anyway. "Control, this is Alpha Squad," Rodriguez reported. "We have visual on approximately 200 prisoners in Section 7. Beginning liberation procedures now." Marines moved with practiced efficiency, using plasma cutters to disable the cell barriers while covering each other against Korthok counterattacks. The enemy warriors were large and strong, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick armor and heavy weapons. In a fair fight, it would have been formidable opponents. But Marines didn't fight fair. Corporal Mike Chen tossed a flashbang grenade around a corner, blinding a group of Korthok guards. Before they could recover, his squad was already past them, heading for the prisoner sections. The Marines had studied the facility layouts for 2 weeks. They knew exactly where to go and how to get there. Contacts Front called out Private Lisa Park as a squad of Korthaks charged down a main corridor. The aliens were roaring battle, cries and firing energy weapons that could burn through most armor. They expected the humans to take cover and return fire from defensive positions. Instead, the Marines charged straight at them. It was a tactic that no civilized species would consider. Running directly at superior firepower, closing to hand, range where the bigger aliens should have had every advantage. But humans had learned their combat skills on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They knew that sometimes the only way to win was to be more aggressive than your enemy thought possible. The Korthaks had never faced opponents who fought like cornered animals. Within minutes, the corridor was clear and the Marines were moving deeper into the facility. At the secondary facility, Major Thompson watched her tactical display with growing satisfaction. Charlie Team had seized the command center within 20 minutes of landing. Bravo Team was methodically clearing prisoner sections, finding hundreds of Zephyrians who had been given up for dead months ago. But it was Alpha Team's progress that impressed her most. Rodriguez and his Marines were moving through the main facility like they owned it, liberating entire sections of prisoners while fighting off desperate Korthak counterattacks. "Ma'am," reported the communications officer, "we're getting panic transmissions from the Korthak command ship. They're calling for reinforcements from their home system." "How long until those reinforcements arrive?" 6 hours minimum." Thompson smiled grimly. "This will be over in 2. Speaker Veltar watched the battle from the command center of the UES Liberty, becoming more disturbed with each tactical report. The humans weren't just attacking the facilities, they were systematically destroying everything the Korthaks had built. No prisoners were being taken, no surrender offers were being accepted. The entire slaving operation was being wiped out completely. Captain Morrison, Veltar said nervously, "Surely some of the Korthaks could be taken alive for questioning. This level of destruction seems excessive." Morrison looked at the alien leader with eyes that had gone cold. "Speaker, those monsters had 8 months to release your people voluntarily. Every day they chose not to, more Zephyrians died in those mines. This isn't a war. This is an extermination. But the galactic community will be watching. What will they think of such violence? They'll think twice before they ignore the next call for help." The battle continued for another 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Marines moved through the facilities like they were cleaning out a nest of vermin, which was exactly how they saw the situation. Every freed prisoner was a victory. Every dead slaver was justice. Rodriguez found the children in the deepest part of the main facility, locked in cages barely big enough for them to lie down. Some were Zephyrian, but others were from species he had never seen before. The Korthaks had been operating their slave trade for years, taking victims from dozens of different worlds. "Control, this is Alpha Squad," Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with emotion. "We have approximately 300 juveniles in the deep sections. Medical support required immediately. These kids are in bad shape." When the last Korthak facility fell silent, the Marines began the slow process of evacuation. Freed prisoners, many of whom had thought they would die in those asteroid mines. Families were reunited. Children found their parents. Communities that had been scattered to the winds were brought back together. The entire galaxy watched in stunned silence as the humans accomplished in less than a day what every other civilization had said was impossible. The Korthak marauders, who had terrorized the outer systems for decades, simply ceased to exist. And in the dark corners of space where other predators lurked, a new fear was born. The humans had arrived, and they played by very different rules. 3 months after the Korthak facilities fell silent, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. In the Great Assembly Hall on Centauri Prime, representatives from 47 different civilizations gathered for an emergency session that everyone knew was really about humanity. Ambassador Piptel of the Zephyrian Council stood at the speaker's podium, looking out at faces that showed everything from admiration to fear. As the new ambassador to Earth, he had volunteered for this difficult assignment because he felt he owed the humans a debt that could never be repaid. "Fellow beings," Piptel began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system, We are here to discuss the human intervention in the Zephyr system. I speak not as a politician, but as someone whose daughter came home because of what the humans did. The Altarian delegate raised a thin hand. Ambassador Piptel, we understand your gratitude. But surely you must admit that the human methods were excessive. Total destruction of the Korthok forces, no prisoners taken, no attempt at negotiation. This sets a dangerous precedent. Piptel's skin shifted to a darker blue, showing his anger. Delegate Kexron, with respect, my people tried negotiation for 8 months while our children died in those mines. The Cortex had every opportunity to release our people voluntarily. They chose to continue the slavery instead. The Centauri representative, a tall being with silver skin and large black eyes, spoke next. The concern is not about this specific situation. Concern is about what happens next. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that far exceed what we believed possible from a recently contacted species. Their willingness to use overwhelming force without diplomatic warning is troubling. From the back of the assembly, a new voice spoke up. It was Captain Morrison, representing Earth at his first Galactic Assembly. He had been invited to explain humanity's actions, though most delegates seemed more interested in criticizing than understanding. If I may, Morrison said, standing up, I think there's been a misunderstanding about what happened in the Zephyr system. We didn't go there to make a statement about galactic politics. We went there to stop slavers from hurting children. Kepler Union delegate, whose species looked like tall, thin trees with crystalline bark, rustled their leaves in what Piptel had learned was their equivalent of nervous laughter. Captain Morrison, surely you understand that such direct action without proper consultation creates instability. What if every species decided to take matters into their own hands? Morrison looked around the assembly with the same calm expression he had worn when facing down Korthok warriors. Delegate, respectfully, we've seen what happens when everyone waits for consultation. 40,000 people get enslaved while committees argue about proper procedures. The vegan delegate, a floating jellyfish-like creature, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that the translators converted to speech. But Captain, your species has fundamentally changed the balance of power in this region. Slave raiding has dropped to 0 in systems near human space. Pirates are avoiding entire sectors. Some species are requesting human protection instead of relying on traditional law enforcement. And that's a problem because, Morrison asked. The assembly erupted in concerned chatter. The idea that military action could actually solve problems was foreign to most of the galactic community. They had built their civilization on the belief that all conflicts could be resolved through talking. That violence was always wrong. That civilized beings never used force against each other. Elder Nextum of the Zephyrian Council rose slowly from his seat. At over 300 years old, he was one of the most respected voices in galactic politics. My friends, I have lived long enough to see many changes in our galaxy. I have watched civilizations rise and fall, seen peace treaties signed and broken, witnessed the slow growth of what we call galactic civilization. The assembly fell quiet out of respect for the elders' age and wisdom. But I have never seen anything like what the humans accomplished, Nextum continued. In less than 1 day, they solved a problem that had plagued our region for decades. The Korthok marauders are gone. Not relocated, not negotiated with, not reformed, gone, and with them went the fear that every parent in the outer systems lived with every day. The Altarian delegate interrupted. Elder Nextum, surely you don't approve of such violent methods? I approve of results, the old being replied firmly. I approve of children sleeping safely in their beds. I approve of families staying together. I approve of evil being stopped when good beings refuse to stop it themselves. Captain Morrison stepped forward. If I may address the Assembly's concerns directly. You're worried that humans are too violent, too willing to use force, too quick to skip diplomacy. You're right, or all of those things. But here's what you're missing. He paused, looking around the room at delegates who represented hundreds of billions of peaceful beings across dozens of star systems, violent toward evil people so that good people don't have to be. We skip diplomacy with monsters so that innocent families don't have to suffer while committees debate. We use overwhelming force against slavers so that children can go home to their parents. The Centauri representative leaned forward. But who decides who is evil? Who determines when diplomacy has failed? Gives humans the right to make these choices. Morrison's expression hardened. The same thing that gave the Korthoks the right to take slaves. The same thing that gave you the right to ignore cries for help. The same thing that gives evil the right to flourish while good people debate proper procedures. Power. The difference, he continued, is what we choose to do with that power. You chose to use yours to maintain comfortable distance from ugly realities. We chose to use ours to bring children home. Pipdel stepped back to the podium. Honored delegates. I have spent 3 months on Earth studying human culture. I've learned something that I think you should all understand. Humans don't see violence and peace as opposites. They see violence against evil as a form of peacemaking. What do you mean? Asked the vegan delegate. They have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Humans believe that sometimes the most peaceful thing you can do is destroy those who make peace impossible. The assembly sat in uncomfortable silence. These were concepts that most galactic civilizations had never seriously considered. The idea that violence could be a tool of justice rather than just another form of evil was foreign to their way of thinking. 6 months later, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Piracy in human-adjacent space had virtually disappeared. Species that had never considered military action were quietly upgrading their defense capabilities. The mere threat of human intervention had made predator species think twice about their activities. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed the concept of help. When the peaceful Andromedan colonies sent out a distress call about raiders attacking their shipping lanes, 17 different civilizations offered assistance within hours. No one wanted to be responsible for another situation where desperation forced someone to call on the humans. Pipdel sat in his office on Earth, looking out at the blue sky and green forests of humanity's homeworld. It was hard to believe that such a beautiful planet had produced such effective warriors. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps you had to love peace enough to fight for it. His daughter was alive because humans understood something that the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to learn. Sometimes the most civilized thing you can do is be uncivilized to those who prey on civilization. The title of Deathworlders was no longer whispered in fear. It was spoken with hope by those who had nowhere else to turn, and in the dark corners of space where predators lurked, it had become the most terrifying word in any language.